you're a gaming founder today, you have to understand who you're building for.
Yeah.
And what is that specific either consumer insight that you have, or what is that specific genre that you're targeting, because the industry has expanded like never before. There is, I guess, no other industry with the kind of telemetry and analytics and kind of studying user behavior better than what gaming does. Now there is a lot more capital available than there ever was for gaming entrepreneurs. If you're looking to build in games, who you build with is often as important as what you build. So be bold in your visions of what is it that you want to build. I got into gaming as a very accidental, actually, entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I used to be a keen gamer, and I grew up playing games.
Hi and welcome to Matrix Moments. Today we have with us Salone Sehgal, who is the founding partner at Lumikai, a gaming-focused venture capital firm. They recently launched their fund 2 with a corpus of $50 million and have been actively investing in shaping the gaming ecosystem in the country. What, now 4 years?
3 years?
3 years,
Yeah.
3 years. Salone has 2 decades of diverse experience across investment banking, venture capital even before Lumikai, and in the past has also built and scaled a gaming company.
That's right.
Excited to have you here, Salone. I think before we dive into the craft of gaming, of business and investing, would be great to share with the audience how did an investment banking turned entrepreneur end up deciding to set up a gaming focused venture capital firm?
Yeah, that's a great question. But first of all, thank you so much for having me here. And it's really a pleasure to be talking to you and talking to you guys about gaming. I got into gaming as a very accidental, actually, entrepreneur. I used to be a keen gamer, and I grew up playing games. But I never saw anyone who looked like me either playing games or in a game world. And I left my investment banking career wanting to do something different, and a colleague of mine from business school approached me and said, hey, do you want to build a gaming company? And I never really thought about gaming as a career, and little did I know that a decade later I would be launching a gaming focused fund. The hypothesis behind that company was that 60% of the world's casual gamers are women, but less than 20% of games are actually built for them. And the endeavor was to build a very large, immersive social world way before the metaverse became popular. And so did a lot of cool building, did a bunch of collaborations with strategic partners, brands, influencers, celebrities. We also had an India-based SKU, and that's how I got really entrenched into the Indian gaming ecosystem. But India gaming of 2013 was very different from India gaming of 2023. But and here I am.
And this was truly social. This was
Yes,
2013.
that's right.
This was based out of India or
No, it was
London?
based out of London.
London.
Yeah.
And if you were to talk to founders today, and even in a folio or when you meet new founders building in gaming, what do you carry from those days of being an entrepreneur, which you bring to the table as in we see now, right? What would be those top 2-3 things that you're able to work with founders around?
Yeah, I have. I used to cover gaming and tech even before. So my journey with the games industry has been fairly deep, even before I was building. But I had renewed interest and respect for gaming entrepreneurs and gaming as an industry, right? There is, I guess, no other industry with the kind of telemetry and analytics and kind of studying user behavior better than what gaming does, right? And when people look at the games industry, they in their head, or when they think about gaming in their head, they see this 13-year-old boy playing Counter-Strike or Dota in the basement, but little do they realize that actually, because of this technology paradigm where computing has changed and where you've got all the entertainment now possible in very, very small, powerful devices, especially those of mobile, that transcended and broke down and made gaming accessible to very, very large demographics, right? So you have now a gamer is a 70-year-old playing casino slots, it's a 50-year-old playing Heyday, it's your 24-year-old playing COVID fashion, it's your 16 to 35-year-old playing Clash of Clans. And I think that that kind of demographic expansion which has happened in gaming has also meant that if you're a gaming founder today, you have to understand who you're building for and what is that specific either consumer insight that you have or what is that specific genre that you're targeting, because the industry has expanded like never before. And I think the second is now there is a lot more capital available than there ever was for gaming entrepreneurs. There are globally 30 plus funds in gaming which invest in gaming. Several of them are region focused, targeting Israel, Turkey, China, Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe. Several of them target specific verticals in gaming, whether it's game tech, gaming infrastructure. So there is a lot more capital now available for gaming founders. So hence, over this next generation, the kind of ambition, the kind of vision that founders can have, it can be much bolder, right? Because and also tech has changed so dramatically, right, as well. So I think the first is, obviously really, really understand your user base. And the second is, there is a lot of now capital available for gaming. So be bold in your visions of what is it that you want to build. I think those are the two insights that at least I had.
Nice. And no, and that's super interesting, right? I think over the last 7-8 decades, gaming has pretty much become the mainstay of culture now. I think at least in the US, it's bigger than all of music and movies,
Absolutely.
everything combined as an industry.
Absolutely.
And I think the bigger shift has also been, which we would love to talk to you about, would be gaming has evolved from being this SKU retail-based distribution
That's
of
right.
physical, like early days of 70s when you
That's
used to
right.
have arcade games and
Yeah.
consoles as a distribution, to now almost these large giants emerging, right? You have Riot's League of Legends, Minecraft, Roblox. It's an endless list. If you had to play that arc forward as a venture capitalist now, where do you think the big shifts are coming in gaming over the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think a little bit of what I said before, and you're absolutely right, right? We, as in Western markets, the gamer has kind of been through this certain trajectory. It was arcade games, then came PC games, and console, then mobile, and subscription, and they've gone through various business models, right? There was this approach of you had paid games and premium games, and then free to play emerged, where games became a service, where it became important, where games were almost no longer like the movie business, because a long time back people used to like to compare games to the movie business, but it was no longer that, right? It was no longer ship and pray. Now it was, you send a game out and then you have the ability to retain and engage a user for months to often years, right? Clash of Clans, for example, is nearly 6-7 years running, because that's the power of live ops. You're constantly generating new content through events, live events that you do within games. And I think the business of gaming has dramatically changed. I believe there are a couple of things. The first is this technology shift which is happening, which has made obviously games very accessible. The second is this demographic shift, and you have now a digitally native population who has learned to swipe before they can type, right? So the kind of immersive experiences, the kind of interactive experiences now they are looking for, they are seeking, that's going to drive the future of whatever entertainment and immersion is going to look like over the course of the next decade. But more importantly, what people forget to realize is that gaming and game tech is already mainstream. We just don't know it, right? It's changing and shaping the ways we make movies. Like, for example, I don't know if you saw Avatar: Way of the Water, but that entire movie is shot in a green studio, right? It's actors wearing bodysuits and face gear, where they were then rendered into the movie and environments.
Now virtual production is going even
Absolutely,
further ahead.
Absolutely, right? I mean, if you look at Mandalorian and all of these, they use Unreal, right? We're seeing gaming and game tech now being used in healthcare, right? For example, you've got medical residents being trained in VR for complex spinal reconstruction surgeries. You're seeing game tech being used in infrastructure. Unity powers Hong Kong Airport for simulating footfalls and traffic. We're seeing low-tech industries like fashion embrace gaming, you know, whether it's digital collectibles or whether it's body mapping or virtual trials to reduce returns. So gaming is everywhere, right? And that's what's made it this 250, $300 billion gorilla in the larger global industry. And this 300 to, you know, this revenue is actually leaving aside the ancillary revenue that's
all of that
coming.
not counted in.
It's not counted in. This is just, you know, content, it's game IP, hardware, peripherals, streaming, etc. combined. So the potential for this industry is just, it's massive, right?
And if you trace back, and again the same evolution, right? Early days of gaming, the money was actually not traditional venture capital, more
Yes,
akin
that's
to
right.
movies business. You
That's
had
right.
publishers,
That's
right?
right.
And they would bring in the usual editorial, marketing, sales, distribution. Now, in this platformized world, what role does a venture capital play in shaping gaming ventures?
No, and that's a really great question. You know, venture capital in gaming is a very, very recent phenomenon. It's probably the last 5 years. When I was building, there was one VC that was doing games investing globally, and that was London Venture Partners, or LVP. It was the fund that I ended up joining. And but before that, the only option that game developers essentially had was publishers, right? And publishers would, you know, and publish. It's a interesting journey with publishers, right? They take a share of your revenue. They will potentially take control of the IP, and then they will have ROFRs on future IPs, right? Whereas I guess with equity investors, it's a little bit different, right? They sink and swim with you. If you don't make money, you don't make money. But if you make money, then, you know, the venture investor is part of that journey of partaking with you. But I think now, because the industry has become so complex, it is so deep, it is so broad, that the role of the venture investor is now emerging in games. And, you know, there are a couple of things that a good sector focused fund can do for you, because if you're a great founder, capital is no problem for you, right? You can go to even an agnostic fund and they're likely to finance you. However, you know, if you're looking to be set up for success, it's great to have industry veterans and sector experts on your side, because, you know, after capital, you as an early stage founder, you will struggle with who to hire, how to hire, which is the best talent, because eventually gaming as an industry, you're competing with global best, right? So you need access to global best in terms of knowledge, in terms of best practices, right? If you want performance marketing experts, you can't take a consumer tech performance marketing expert and put them into a gaming company. You need somebody who's built in that space before, right? You need access to strategic advice and strategic investors, because eventually 90% of exits in gaming happen via strategics, right? Also, those are the guys who are best placed to provide you access to, you know, best talent or the best kind of know-how. You also need access to distribution. You know, if you're a content mobile gaming company right now building for the global markets, distribution is a huge issue. So, and if you want to distribute, how do you distribute, right? How do you monetize? If you want to go to ad-based monetization or IAPs, what are best practices there? What's the best ad tech platform to do this? So, you know, gaming as an ecosystem in itself has so much complexity that from the outside it looks like this monolithic entity. You know, you invest in a games company, games is like content and that's it, you kind of ship it out. But there are so many sub-verticals, verticals, so many genres, which makes it very difficult sometimes for a founder to parse through all of that. And a good venture investor will essentially try and, you know, demystify that for you, and will potentially help you set you up for success. And, you know, this is notwithstanding the fact that they'll also help you on the fundraise and open up doors which you ordinarily as a founder could not have opened for yourself. And I think those are very important junctures, especially for a gaming founder.
Totally agree, and I think which is also why, you know, unlike you, us being a generalist venture fund, when we decided to go deeper on gaming, it meant that you have to build out a team very differently, right?
Absolutely.
Now, and hence the team which we have structured is also all gaming folks, right? People have gone through that journey, who have been doing that. I agree, it's very difficult. People tend to paint it with a single stroke and say it's just content. It's not. It's far more complex. But just pushing that venture investing angle a bit more, right? We went from retail distribution to platformized distribution. They've become platforms of their own now. Minecraft is a giant platform. Roblox is a giant platform. The largest platform-based publisher, so to say, is Tencent,
Mm.
right? Do you think that they have become so big now that again we could end up being in a zone of saying you have few publishers who now actually, unlike in the previous world where it was only retail distribution,
Mm-hmm.
now they do control the digital distribution, right?
Mm.
Do you worry about that?
So, because I've been now in the gaming industry for more than a decade, right? There is a particular kind of there's a peculiarity to gaming, right? Which is that the industry is very dynamic, right? Ultimately, gaming, as you mentioned it, eventually sits at the confluence of technology, culture, and new media, and it's very influenced by what is the current zeitgeist, right? Every 2 years, you'll have a new genre, you have a new breakthrough, you'll have a new platform that will emerge, you'll have new technology, new demographic, and what some of these larger players have, I guess, come to the conclusion of is that it is better to buy than to build. And as a result of which, in fact, it drives certain outcomes for the games industry. And if you will trace back data, you will see, and you can trace it back the last 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, maybe over a decade, you will see that more than 90% of exits in gaming happen via strategic M&A. It's these large companies and these large publishers, as you said, which are very cash rich, don't have that much debt, and are constantly looking to either consolidate or diversify, right? Enter new markets, new geographies, enter new demographics, and that is very interesting, right? Especially as a venture investor, where you're often looking for liquidity events, because
Yeah.
eventually at the end of the day, the idea is to be able to invest in a company and be able to exit and at a certain return. And in the gaming industry, that's very frequent, because every couple of years you'll see this wave of M&A that will happen. 2010, 2012, we saw massive M&A, like Walt Disney Playdom, we saw Sony Gaikai, and these are
Big outcomes.
big outcomes, right? Then 2014, 2016, you saw Tencent Supercell, you saw Zynga Natural Motion, you saw a bunch of these Mojang Microsoft,
Yep.
right? That was that period. Then if you look back to more recent times, 2019, 2022, we saw mega exits, right? And at each point of time, you've seen bigger exits because gaming is becoming bigger, right? Apart from, let's say, Microsoft Activision, you also saw Unity, Iron Source, you saw
Yes.
Take-Two, Zynga, you saw Sony, Bungie, and those are the mega ones, right? But there is this sweet spot of M&A which exists between, let's say, 200 to 800 million dollars, and then this 1 to 5 billion dollars, which happens remarkably frequently in this industry. So for us, from a investor perspective, we actually welcome it, because eventually these large players will become buyers of companies that, if these become category leaders, they will eventually become buyers. And I think that's the more interesting side of gaming, and I don't worry about that. There have always been
Yeah, it's a
large
great
players.
opportunity. And you mentioned somewhere there, and let's double click on that, new demographics, new geographies. If you were to think of some top of mind pieces for new company creation today, like vectors, broad vectors, right? What would those be? Let's talk demographics, right? What is a big, wide opportunity that founders could go after?
Well, I think one is the India market, right? And there's a reason why we are in India, right? When we looked at inflection markers, let's say, and I've covered, China, Turkey, Vietnam. I've seen the rise of those markets. And when I started to look at the India market, and this was back in 2017, 2018, and I've been tracking the market for a long time now, certain inflection points that I had seen in other markets started exhibiting in the India market, right? Whether it is the rise of smartphones, whether it is very cheap data, whether it is the rise of digital payments, and now an average Indian consumes 20 gigs of data a month. The biggest beneficiaries of that are video content and gaming, right? And with the rise of digital payments, I think it unlocked what was the biggest reason for skepticism for a lot of venture investors in India was monetization, And even when we launched the fund, let's say, about 3 years back, a lot of people said, oh, Indians don't pay for games. There's only RMG in India. And for us, it was a matter of time to be able to showcase that, no, actually, monetization is unlocking for this market. Now, in India, games constitute more than 50% of the App Store. Right, the top 5 Indian publishers have grossed over $900 million over the last 4 years. building for the global markets, also building for the local markets, right? So that kind of monetization shift, that kind of domestic success stories are now starting to emerge. So for us, India is a key part
And on
of that
that
piece.
front,
Yes.
and I totally agree, like last 2 decades, we have seen uh, a company list on the Indian bosses. We have had successes like Play Simple.
Absolutely.
We have had bootstrap successes like Gameberry.
Absolutely, yeah.
Multiple, right?
Yeah.
But even if you, just playing the devil's advocate there,
Sure.
right? Even if you think of the bulk of it, when we look at companies like Dream 11, Zupi, Winzo, many more,
Sure.
right? They still form the largest share of dollars, right, in India. And many a times, as founders, as investors, one does tend to have this rear view
Sure.
bias, right? Keep looking back, and you still think, yes, big four publishers, $900 million gross last 4 years, but it's still a blip.
Yeah.
If you had to think of a why now, and we do expect it to inflect, we do believe, all of us believe it will inflect. What is that big why now? That now it would truly inflect.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair question. I think everybody asks us that, right? I think the biggest battle is changing perceptions, and that's the only way you can do that is either through lived experiences or through data, right? And when we looked at the data, everybody said, oh, RMG is 100% of the market. That's the only way that monetizes. But actually, over the course of the last 3 years, RMG's share of total revenue has actually been reducing. So RMG is not 100% of the market.
Surely not 100%.
It's actually 57% of the market as of last
Yeah.
year. IAPs and ad revenue in India on games has actually steadily been growing. In fact, last year IAPs
Outpaced.
were outpaced actually RMG growth, right? So when you start seeing those green shoots, right, that's when you know where the opportunity is, because the half of the revenue pie is actually very well represented from venture capital. The other half of the revenue pie is
underrepresented.
actually underserved and untapped. That's the opportunity that we feel very excited about, because that's the opportunity and that's the trend that we have seen in other markets, right? Eventually, IAP growth, ad growth, eventually those do outstrip this, because if you look at, let's say, an Indian gamer, their sociology is very different from that of the Western gamer. You see, they were never PC gamers, they were never console gamers. An Indian gamer is many times a first time smartphone user. So they have been exposed to everything from video chat, social media, audio chat, messaging, games, all at the very first time, right? The first time you're spending money on games is actually via RMG. That's their first digital transaction, that micro transaction that they're getting used to, right? Eventually, will they transition into IAP? Is there a market for IAPs? We believe there is. Will these users transition? Maybe, perhaps not. But there is a prevailing view where there is a fair overlap of fantasy gamers with those of the gamers which play, let's say, battle royale
Yeah,
games.
that's true.
Right? So there is a large Venn diagram there which overlaps, and those are the folks which are also spending, right? Prior to, let's say, 3 years back, nobody thought a game, a 1 gigabyte game like a BGMI, like a Free Fire, would be making any money at all in India, right? But it does, right? In the last year, revenue growth has actually outstripped download growth. Out of the top 10 grossing titles, there have been foreign publishers particularly have now seen revenue growth ranging from 40 to 70% just from the India market, right? So yes, an India market is not a China market. It's probably not going to be a China market. Let's say it's not going to work with the pace of that. But those green shoots are really undeniable at this point of time. It's very easy to say, oh, 5 game publishers do $900 million, that's a blip. But literally 4 years back, that was an impossibility.
That didn't exist.
That didn't exist. How many companies, consumer tech companies, have top lines like that, right, in India? So I
that's
think
true. That's true.
that I guess shift is happening. It's gradual, but we're long-term investors, and we've got investors who are long-term, patient capital. So I guess that's the inflection points that we're seeing in the market, at least.
No, I think for all of us who are spending time in this space, that's what excites us. But if one was to look at the content attribute, just that piece, right? And let's say across casual, hybrid casual, mid-core, hardcore. In the Indian context, we have been not seeing big breakthroughs come out. especially at least on the mid-core hardcore side, right? You mentioned BGMI, and the Indian audience is unlike, let's say, the markets that you spoke of, let's say China or even Korea. They actually ended up having a lot of local IP creation, right? Why is it that in India we have not seen local IP creation yet?
The operative word is yet, right?
That's why I said yet.
And so you see in China, right, and I think we talked about this, I remember once before, in, you go back history and you look at what happened in China, right? In 2004 in China, 60% of revenues came from foreign IPs. In fact, The Legend of Mir was a Taiwanese title,
Yes.
which was the top grossing revenue title. And everybody said, oh, Chinese IP, they do only piracy, they only do counterfeit games. And it's never going to happen, right? And by 2007, the market shifted. China gaming market in 2007 was about $1 billion, $1.5 billion, very similar to, in terms of IAP revenue and ad revenue, very similar to, I guess, India to some extent last year from our research that we did. In literally 5 years, from 2007 to 2013, Chinese gaming market went to $13 billion, right? And what happened between these ensuing years over this decade, essentially a couple of things, right? 3G happened, digital payments happened, but more importantly, talent started emerging. It was, 3 games companies went public. There was Giant, Perfect World, and Kingsoft. I think these 3 companies went public. There was a lot of foreign M&A. Walt Disney came and set up, Vivendi came and set up. There was a big push from the CCP around building games for the Chinese youth and, a way to kind of talk about Chinese culture. So then that's when, NetEase and a few others launched Fantasy Westward Journey, which were based on Chinese lore. And in fact, it took NetEase many trials many trials and many iterations to actually come at Fantasy Westward Journey. But more importantly, entrepreneurial talent emerged, right? And this is something that we're seeing right now, right? In India, we have seen the likes of a Zynga, we have seen the likes of a GSN, Scopely, a EA, a Ubisoft, a Glue Mobile, a RockU. They all have teams in India, but there was never any capital, right? So an Indian game developer was always hamstrung for capital. And this is, the non-RMG side. These are the guys who are building gaming content or platforms, etc. However, now the fact, there has been a publicly listed company, there has now been more capital, there are venture capital funds which are now actively looking at gaming. So now over the course of the last 3 years, we ourselves has now seen over 1,500 companies, right, in this space. We're seeing now founders emerge from these large game teams, and these guys have now managed P&Ls of $50, $100 million and saying, hey, we know live ops, we've seen the 0 to 1 journey.
And not just live ops, they've seen the entire
life cycle of, from 0 to 1, 0 to 1 to 100, and some even exit, right? So those founders are now emerging and saying, hey, we want to build, and we want to now be building the, Playrix from India or the King from India, or we want to be part of that. And we've seen that in Turkey, we've seen that in Israel, and of course the China market built both domestically and globally as well. And that kind of emergent founder behavior is now coming. So, I believe that this will only progress. We progressively will see more talent emerge, and we will see more capital. And gaming as an industry has already seen liquidity events, right?
And just from the business model bit, we've seen premium, freemium, RMG, 3 big, broad buckets of where you could slot each gaming company or a gaming IP. Do you see more innovation happening on that front?
Definitely on the free-to-play side. Premium games in India are still a very, very small fraction. I believe that that's not a very significant part in terms of and depends on what you define as premium. Is that in terms of AAA games, etc., or is that in terms of the business model on the monetization? Premium games is obviously a very, very smaller
and anyway, free to play is now pretty much the dominant.
Absolutely, and free to play is pretty much the I'd say the largest grossing part of at least mobile gaming, right? And India being a 98% mobile market is something that we believe that free to play is probably the best way to access that market. RMG, of course, you guys are investors in the space, and there have been a spate of regulatory developments which have taken place in this in that space. So for us, we always saw that there was a depth and breadth to India gaming which was beyond that as defined as RMG, and that's where for us we are. Our portfolio is a reflection of that, right? We have content plays, we have platforms, we've got tools, tech, infrastructure. We've got some that we call, which are at the intersection of what we call systems of play.
Yeah.
How do you take applied game mechanics and how do you disrupt, existing industries like a fintech, a health tech, an ed tech, and those are exciting for us. So that's essentially our thesis.
Got it. And just one last bit that we have been thinking hard about, at least as a team. It has been that beyond these typical monetization models, it seems like if you look at Roblox, Minecraft, it seems like this is going a huge convergence of media, social, and gaming all becoming one, right? It's gaming platforms are the new social platforms. Social platforms are the new media platforms and the media companies. Within that convergence, do you see big unlocks happening in terms of the business of gaming, which goes beyond IAP and RMG? Do you see, or are you seeing company creation happen where these platforms can now start playing a role in driving commerce? Driving, or if you think of the old Disney flywheel, which used to be there of taking an IP and then monetizing it in multiple ways. Do you see that happening in India?
I think that's a really interesting question, and it's two parts to it. Games becoming new social media, but I've been in the games industry for a long time, right? That's always been there. We've always had large social words in gaming.
From the oldest days.
From the oldest days. Worlds Away was 1985, and that was a social world which enabled people to interact and socialize with each other. Then 2001, RuneScape came out, RuneScape Live, right, which was again another.
RuneScape is actually a master lesson in building social platforms.
Absolutely, right. And in fact, every successful consumer-facing app is actually a game in disguise, right? If you use Instagram, Facebook, your virtual gifting, your likes, etc., all of these actually originated from gaming. And if you, apart from RuneScape, there was Second Life, EVE Online. EVE Online is just this fantastic
I'm a hardcore
example.
EVE Online player, so.
Yeah, exactly. Fantastic example of games as a livelihood, or gaming as just more than entertainment, gaming as a community, right? That's always existed. I feel the demographic shift, because Roblox is actually very interesting. Roblox is almost 50% female demographic, right? The demographics have shifted right now, and I think that has made gaming so much more powerful. And I do believe there is definitely a convergence or a move towards where games just become more than entertainment. It becomes more social. It's about community. It's about hanging out. But whether that emerges out of India, that is a question that I believe, I think that we'll still wait to see that play out, because some of these large platforms have already got distribution, right, and they've already kind of got that infrastructure all set in place. Whether it be an India-specific play, I think that'll depend. I think that needs to be adapted to a very different kind of a context. In our portfolio, we have a company called Ilo, for example, right? That's a social gaming platform, but in a very different way. It's almost interactive television, right? They've got everything from live game shows to astrology to celebrity quizzes to influencer-led games on their platforms. And again, that has a 50% female demographic built for largely Bharat users, and that's a very different kind of a play, right? But it's also a platform play, bringing people together, entertainment, hanging out, meeting friends, and I think that's a very India-centric play. And that's an interesting play in its own right, right? So I feel like there are these opportunities and category sets. Now, whether it's going to be an exactly Roblox lookalike, I'm skeptical about that. But it's interesting to see that behavior emerge.
No, perfect. And on a parting note, one advice you would give to future founders, what would that be?
Well, I think if you're looking to build in games, who you build with is often as important as what you build. And whether it is your choice of investors, whether it's the choice of your co-founders, whether it's the choice of your early team. So pick well.
Perfect. Thank you, Salone, and thank you, everyone. All of us, Salone and us, remain super excited about the business of gaming. And if you are building, do it up Salone at Lumikai, or reach out to anyone, Vivek, myself, or Rahul in the team at Matrix. We would love to collaborate, and looking forward to investing and backing this ecosystem together.
Yeah, look forward to it. Thank you so much again for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.